time, my friends. Retired United Church minister Mary Margaret Boone is here with me, Elizabeth Macdonald, and we are ready to engage you in a "we're not done yet" conversation. Mary Margaret, making room in the church for everyone so that all ages, people at all stages of life, everybody can be involved in ways that are active and meaningful and faithful. This has been your passion for a long time. And over the last couple of years, you've been directing your energy into the East Central Ontario Regional Council's Affirming Forum that works with and for people of all gender identities and sexual orientations. So I'd like to ask you, can you remember when you discovered that there wasn't just one sexual orientation, that not every human being is heterosexual? Can you remember that?
It's interesting because when you think about that, sometimes you think it would be like this really dynamic, energizing moment or something. But for me, looking at that question, it was a recollection in high school. My very best friend, who's still a very good friend, she always had a boyfriend, always. Yes, I was jealous. But anyway, she always had a boyfriend. One time we were in conversation on the phone and she and her boyfriend had broken up. And I said, like, what happened? And she just said to me, well, he told me he was gay. And I said, well, why was he dating you? And she said, well, that's what was expected. And so she said, everything's fine. We had a really great conversation. And I said, well, you know, that's really great. The idea, like now I think about it, I never thought of the word safe, that he felt safe talking to her, that he felt safe coming out. And that made me think that I also didn't have any strong feelings about him being gay in terms of negative feelings or anything like that. So I can only think that sort of organically, either growing up, my mom was a very open-minded person, that and in our high school, that it didn't rise up as an issue. I don't remember stories about bullying. I don't remember stories about gay bashing or anything like that. I'm not saying that they didn't exist, because that can be an undercurrent wherever you are and you just don't hear because you're in your own insulated world. But also I went to high school in the mid to late 60s, and so much was changing. Protests and peace and social justice issues and economic issues. And when I was very involved in that kind of thing. So I think that it was there around me.
Yeah. Well, Mary Margaret, let's fast forward a few years. You've already acknowledged the importance for your friend's boyfriend to feel safe. Let's fast forward a bit. Was there a particular person or situation that helped you to realize how important it is for us in the church to create safer space for folks of all gender identities and sexual orientations?
I think probably because as I've become more involved in the Affirming Forum, and as I open myself to more stories, personal stories and things that I read, it brings back, you do hear more things, and then I remember more things. And one of them was the church that I started to go to had a minister and who had gone from being married to divorce by the time she began her call. And at that time, I wasn't going to church, but I worked in a little tiny bank, and you sort of hear everything. And the question was, would they still have hired you if they had known you were divorced? And she said, oh, absolutely not. And when I did join the church, they were talking about things. This was the first woman minister they had. That was huge. And to be divorced, that was probably very huge too, because it's a small rural community. But I found when that minister left, found out that she identified as a lesbian, but could never come out, couldn't tell people that. There were two people in the congregation that she could be open and honest with. And I thought that was awful. Because one of the things that I felt that was in the United Church was that they would be open and accepting to people who were Two-Spirit, GLBTQIA plus people. In the same community, the minister at the Anglican Church was gay. Everyone knew he was gay. He obviously had people he trusted that, but he could never come out then in the Anglican Church. And that was wrong. That just was morally and ethically wrong as far as I was concerned. In more recent years, I've heard stories of people who were very hurt by the church. And that's people who became ministers. And it had stories that when we gathered at Queen's, and I would hear the things of them being bullied, of them being trashed, of the church not accepting them. And I'm like, my thoughts were, why are you here? But you make change from within. And I admire them so much for being able to do that. So they need support, they need allies, they need friends in the church. And when we were, I used to be on the committee for VIBE, which is Ventures in Biblical Experiences, and it was a former presbytery venture, and we would interview our candidates for employment, and it became very important to us that we made sure that, because you didn't have to be from the United Church to be a counselor or a director, but it was very important that you followed the United Church in being open about people who were gay, lesbian, trans, bisexual, that you didn't have, that you weren't uncomfortable with that. And one year we actually interviewed two people who came from a Pentecostal background where their churches were not supportive of people who were GLBTQIA plus and Two-Spirit. It just, it was, you can be here, but you cannot be involved anymore. You can't teach Sunday school. You can't sing in the choir. You can't do these things. And both of them left their churches because of that. And that's a hard thing to do, because if you've grown up in your church, it's been your support and your safe space, you thought, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. And I've seen that happen to so many who have left the church entirely.
So you've seen it over the years in different situations. It's become clear to you. I'm struck, though, that there still seems to be many people who've just never given it a thought. What might church be like for someone who's Two-Spirit or lesbian, gay, trans, just never given it a thought? What do you say to church folk like this? Just haven't thought about it at all.
Yeah.
Is there a way to, is there a way to engage people, to to help them see what has become really evident to you?
There can be a lot of power in the pulpit. And I think that without being a pulpit bully, you can use all the stories that are in the Bible, the parables, to talk about justice. I mean, if you talk about, I mean, where do you go with a situation that says, love one another as I have loved you? There's no except in this.
Mhm.
There's a lot of opportunities to do that from the pulpit. And then it can carry over into coffee hour. And that it's important to do that because, first of all, for me, it was always emphasized in my theological training that you have to be authentic. You can't go into a church that and then you find out that they don't think the same way about you as, say, same-gender marriage or anything like that, that you're going to bend to them. You can't do that. You can't do that and be authentic in your preaching. And so it's really important that we, all of us, educate ourselves, that we start reading things outside of our boxes, that we start, sometimes it's hard to engage with people that outside of our church communities. And I think that's been a failing with churches a lot, because they, especially when they were successful, it's really easy to stay inside your own box. You have to get outside of those four walls, because you never know who's in your community who needs spiritual nourishment, and you need to be out there for all of them. Mm-hmm. But you have to look inward too. You have to self-examine. I learning about microaggressions was a really good learning curve for me, because we probably all have used them. So you have to learn.
Was there a particular, can you give us an example? Was there a particular microaggression? I think that's a term that we're hearing more and more often, and not all of us fully appreciate what's involved. So was there a particular microaggression that opened your eyes and maybe opened your heart too?
This is one that I said myself, that, and I was in school. And so I'd gone through a lot of different, a lot of learning curves. And when the United Church, that was when the United Church decided that each individual church session could decide their marriage policy about whether or not they should be able to marry gays and lesbians, do same gender marriages. And I thought, okay, this is good, because people will get away from this top-down idea that they often have in the church when a decision is made that they don't like. So it can be a grassroots thing. So in my naivety, I'm thinking, this is awesome, because all these churches are going to come together and we're going to be able to have same gender marriages. And isn't that wonderful? And one of my colleagues, who's still a very good friend, just kind of jumped on me and said, no, Mary Margaret, it's not good. It's not good, because what happens when this lesbian couple moves from Toronto, they move out to the country and they want to go to church, and they go into this church and this church doesn't sanction same gender marriages? How welcome are they going to feel? How much of it's just going to be, what's the word? As though, yes, we're welcoming, but please just stay over in your spot, and we're not going to change. You have to change to accommodate us. So we have stereotypes and sensibilities, and there's always things out there that we say without thinking and without knowing that they're hurtful and harmful. So just taking a moment to think before you speak is really important, and also listening. And if someone corrects you about what you've said, listen to them, take it to heart, and examine yourself about what you've said, what's wrong with it, or, just to
And
go through that.
you've said something very important there, Mary Margaret, when someone perhaps corrects you, and that says to me, we need to be willing to have conversations with each other, sometimes that are going to be awkward or hard conversations.
For sure, for sure. As I said, I started going to a small rural church, and I also was settled in a rural community. And it's that sort of, that sense of everyone's the same, like 99.9% WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And so then it's important to think outside of your box and look around your community. How do you know that you're all in this same mode? You don't, until you get involved in the community and be truly outgoing and welcoming, not just in the church.
We're also learning that sometimes our assumptions based on how somebody looks simply aren't accurate. You can't tell all the time simply by looking at someone whether they are gay or straight, whether they are cisgender or transgender. Those things aren't obvious. Even assuming by the color of someone's skin, their racial background, that's not always obvious at all, is it?
That's right. And it's important not to assume. I think that in general, well, certainly my upbringing has been, it was binary. It's just like sort of good and evil. There's no grays in between until you start learning. And then there's a huge learning curve for you to embrace. And that's one of the things I really like about the pronouns. And when it was first, I was at a seminar and we were asked to introduce ourselves and just a brief thing about sort of who we were and name our pronouns. And I was like, why do I have to do that? And it was really good, I think, because the first person to introduce themselves used the pronouns they, them. And then I thought, oh, right. I can't make the assumption that everyone here, by the way they look, is he or she. And I have to respect how they want to be addressed. And that's very important.
And now that we are often communicating the way you and I are today via Zoom, it's a lot easier. We put our name on the screen, and it's a very easy thing to add those pronouns.
It is. And I know I've talked to people just in casual, like on our walks, and about the pronouns, because I knew it would be a new thing for them and challenging. And it is in our language, because we associate they, them with plural. And it doesn't immediately fit our language, grammatically, especially if you grew up in my era where grammar was taught.
Mine too. Yeah.
So but I also remember one of my professors who would like seriously would not let you genderize God. Like you could fail a paper if you referred to God as he or she.
Wow.
And she was very strong about it. And so I would hear words like God's self, which were hard for me to say, but you practice and you use it. And then when you speak with people, you have to listen, and you have to find out what they want first. I mean, in a lot of cases, I think especially in the United Church, or in the things that I'm involved in, I would not have a problem asking someone, what pronouns do you use? Because I don't want to assume by looking at the pronouns that they do use. I can see it being more difficult as you move outside of the United Church box, but I see it. I had to give a little talk to one of our committees in eCork about using pronouns. And so while I was looking for different things, I landed on a university website that had an entire piece on using pronouns and how important it was.
Yeah.
And ask, and get used to introducing yourself. And I thought, what a great thing. I'm seeing it beyond the United Church of Canada.
Our church. Mary Margaret, thank you so very much. I hear the journey calling us on, and I'm very grateful to you for taking this time to have this conversation with me. So thank you, and blessings as the journey continues.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for this work that you're doing.